A 5 minute delay here, but we are here for Content and Commerce, myself and Isaac Morey. We are going to talk about structured data today. We're going to jump right into it. Isaac, do you have anything you want to talk about in newsworthy before we get going?
Well, I think this is a little bit old at this point, but a couple weeks ago, the ChatGPT Etsy um, collaboration launched. So there's shopping on ChatGPT now, and I think that's a big signal of things to come. So I'm sure we'll have a full episode on that coming up soon. But if you're in e-commerce and you're interested in agentic commerce, which you definitely should be, this is something to pay attention to because people are going to start buying through their AI systems, through LLMs, and that's really going to change the game. So
Yeah.
definitely look into that if you're, if that's relevant to you. And with that, I think we could go ahead and start hitting the main topic for the day, which is structured data.
All right. So, what the heck? What is structured data? I have no idea. Tell me what I. Do you give me the 411 on the 101 of structured data?
Yeah, so a good way to think about structured data, imagine a restaurant and you open up the menu and it's just like blocks of text talking about what the different food that they offer is. You could certainly still read it and understand what's there, but it's a lot easier when they have it divided up into like, here are the appetizers, here are the entrees, here are the desserts and the drinks, separated out into a structured format. Structured data is kind of like that, but for bots, for the crawler bots with search engines that are indexing your site, and for the tools that LLMs use to gather data and train based on it, and all of that. So from an analogy, that's what structured data is. Here's what it is in a concrete sense, is like these tags that go into the code of your website and say, this is a blog article, this is a product, this is a service, etc. There's lots of different structured tags you can add within your site to clarify what things are. Like, this is a price, this is a product, this is a blog, this is an author. And as you can start to imagine from that, they interconnect with each other. So a blog would have an author associated with it, a product would have a price associated with it. And when you tag your data, like the content on your site, in this way, it becomes easier for, say, Google or ChatGPT to index and understand the content that you've worked so hard to put on there.
I think one of the things is how it indexes the site. The old idea was word stuffing, having the right words in there. Tell us the differences in how we're now organizing our data in terms of structured data, but what's the big difference between that and SEO?
Yeah, well, I think structured data is it's basically a tool in your SEO arsenal. So in the same way that including keywords is helpful to rank on any given term.
I had a great quote. I wrote an article yesterday about this very subject, and one of the things that's happening right now is, and I think this was a SEMrush research paper they did, AEO is converting at 27%, where SEO converts at 2%, and that's a 12.8% higher conversion rate right now. And I think now is the time, if you're thinking about AEO, GEO, AIO, whatever the O thing is, now is the time to start implementing these things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think the structured data is one element of that. Whether you're trying to rank on search engines or AI, writing articles, hitting your keywords is important. And at the same time, it's less about quality and less about quantity and more about quality as we go on. So like tagging the content that you already have and making sure you're good on a technical front might be more helpful than just continuing to pile on more and more articles without differentiating them. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
and
that
one of the
answers the
term
question.
AEO is answer engine optimization, and I think part of the answer is in the acronym, right? Answers. But tell us why you want to have questions and answers on your website compared to just word stuffing.
Yeah, FAQs are great because they really cross the bridge of being great for both humans and being great for bots, whether that's a search engine bot or an LLM bot, because they have the structured data element, like you can tag an FAQ question and an FAQ answer. And that's also great for humans because, usually we're, especially with LLMs, for example, we are usually searching for answers to very specific questions. So you can signal to, ChatGPT, like here's a question and an answer, and we're providing those in a concise format. And to a human who's actually browsing your website, it also is a good user experience. They don't have to go through an entire blog to find the answer to this question. If it really is frequently asked, maybe you just put that FAQ somewhere highly visible on your site and provide a better user experience.
When you're talking about the structure itself, how is that structure helping you to build trust with your clients and show credibility online?
Yeah, the structure of the structured data, I would say, is building trust more than anything with the crawler bots, similar to how citing your sources or like putting an author on an article might be helpful to a human. To a bot that's crawling your site, knowing the structure of what that content is, like, oh, this is a price, this is a product title, this is a product description, just gives it a higher signal of authority because you've shown your work and given it a context through which to interpret all of these things. So when we talk about structured data and authority, a lot of structured data is invisible. It's just these tags that are on the code of what's actually displaying, but they do show, search engine crawlers and LLMs what context to understand these things in, and for that reason, it helps boost your EEAT for Google, for example. You're just giving more context and kind of like citing your sources.
Does that mean then your data or your site is also going to be better accessible because of the extra thought into going to labeling your data and maybe bringing up images, especially like it's much easier for an LLM to understand an image if the image has a tag on it and is properly tagged for accessibility. Do all those things play into just having a better experience on the website for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, at the end of the day, a lot of things that we do to provide a good experience to users also provide a good experience to like Google when it's trying to index your site, or to ChatGPT when it's trying to understand your site. So adding like a caption and an alt description to your images will help users, but it will also help like Google to understand what's there as well.
What do you think is the most important thing then to start doing when you really want to employ AEO, AIO, GO? Like let's stop for a second, because what the heck are the three acronyms? Why don't you explain what GEO is and why that's different from AEO and AIO?
Okay, so AIO is my favorite term, AI optimization. I feel like that maps cleanly onto SEO, which is search engine optimization. So, with search engine optimization, you're trying to feed the correct information to Google so that it shows you as the top result. If you want to improve your SEO on the term content marketing, you might write some really informative articles about content marketing so that you show up. AIO is the same concept applied to AI. So if you want to show up in ChatGPT about content marketing, writing about content marketing is also a good strategy. And the same thing goes with structured data. Like, making sure your site is good on the back end will help give you more authority and more chance of showing up on both of those platforms. Answer engine optimization is just a little bit different because it focuses on showing up in any kind of like question and answer system. So, for example, like Siri or other forms of voice search are good examples of answer engines. And with those, there seems to be like an extra level of importance to the structured data, which you can see why. Like your FAQs are like a gold mine for anything like Siri that's trying to answer your questions directly, especially if it doesn't have like a generative AI capability built into it. GEO is generative engine optimization, and I think that is kind of synonymous with AIO, and I think they're all fairly synonymous. Like at the end of the day, it comes down to creating great content that's up to date, that's informative, and that is, structured in such a way that these platforms can read and understand it. And so, to an extent, even AIO and like all of these AI terms, AIO, AEO, GEO, are fairly similar to SEO. There are like, I think some subtle differences and things that people are trying to identify and point out. Like social media seems to train AIs and show up in LLMs in a more outsized way than it does with search engines. So there are some differences, but I feel like a lot of the underlying principles are pretty similar, and it just comes down to like, who is the one telling the story, and are you telling the story well? And if you are, then you have a good chance of being featured by Google or by ChatGPT or by, whatever comes next or whatever alternative systems people are using, Perplexity or Gemini or Bing or, what have you.
When you're producing this content, how do you ensure that you stand out from everybody else that's producing similar content?
Well, one of the best ways to do that is don't just copy paste things from ChatGPT. I think that is a very obviously fast and time efficient and cost efficient way of creating content, and so it's very tempting. But you have to imagine your competitors are all doing the same thing. So putting human attention and care into your content is huge. And that's not to say you can never use an LLM. Like they're pretty useful, for like polishing articles or for even generating sections or asking what might be missing. But I think using them as a tool and not as a complete automation shortcut is, the way to go.
How about then? So, I think what I hear you saying is if I'm just creating all my content directly out of ChatGPT, cutting and pasting it onto my website, I'm going to be similar to everybody else that's doing the exact same thing in the world that's using ChatGPT. I think 80% of the people use that ChatGPT, or even 90%. It's got a huge market share. So that just means you're making your content the same as your competitors making their content, and without having a human involved to edit and make sure it's different. You're not going to really stand out. Is that what I hear you saying?
Exactly. So Google is really like what makes Google special, and the reason why it's, the most popular search engine is it does the best job of finding high quality content that people really want to consume. And so if it's competing with, or, if you're competing with 500 other businesses that all copy pasted articles about your industry from ChatGPT, why would Google pick you out of all those articles? But if your article was written with, your own attention, your own stories and experiences, then I think you have a much better chance of standing out among those other companies because, maybe one or two of them might have taken the time to do that, whereas the other, 497 all wrote it with ChatGPT in 2 minutes. So I think that is like the value prop of doing your own content with humans in the age of AI, especially because who do you think is going to have more influence on ChatGPT as it continues to evolve? The people who are just regurgitating exactly what ChatGPT says, or the people who are creating new, fresh training data for the AI systems to use?
Yeah, I think it's easy for a merchant to get fooled to thinking that whatever, because sometimes it does come up with some fun things, ChatGPT, but it's easy to get fooled into thinking that whatever they've come up with is super unique to their own thing. And so I think having your own team edit it, read it, change it, update it, and maybe even start with a good basis to make your prompt when you're starting, and having some kind of training done on your GPT to ensure that it's going to be somewhat different, even starting and then going through and reading it and editing it and making sure it's your voice, right? I think that's one of the most important things to look at.
Yeah, that's a great point because even within the context of using AI for your content, there's the person who just puts something in gets a response, copies it, and pastes it. And there's the person who writes a really careful prompt, who has already pre-trained their LLM with, say, a brand voice guide, and then who comes back and edits it. And if you compare the work and the attention that goes into that, I'm sure that a better, more customized, unique article is going to come out than, someone who says, write me an article about dogs, and then post it to their dog food e-commerce store without a second glance.
Right. I interviewed Sharon Gee from BigCommerce last week. She had such great insights. One of the things she said that there's two ways that you could write content for your site, and there's two different versions of the content you need to have because there are humans going through your site and there's bots going through your site. So you need to optimize your site both for humans to have visual, emotional, and persuasive content, and then you need to optimize it for your agent that's going to be coming through and getting it. And that doesn't just mean your Google bot, but that now means there's a ChatGPT bot, and there's a Claude bot, and there's a Gemini bot, and there's all kinds of different bots that are out there scraping your site that are different, and that needs to be structured, contextual, and comprehensive. And comprehensive, I think, is an interesting thing there because you want to have as much data on there as possible. And really, if your bot is scraping your site, that data can be very condensed, very dense data, because it doesn't care what it looks like. It doesn't necessarily care if there's a lot of returns, if there's space in there. So there's two different types of data that you have. And I know we even talked about, do we want to have a different robot TXT? I don't think that's possible yet, or it is possible but not likely that it's going to work very well. But I do feel like there's going to be soon a robot.txt file that LLMs respect the different site that you're going to get sent to, that's just going to be huge blocks of text.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we are already out of time. Geez, what do you want to talk about next week, Isaac?
Well, I think the rise of agentic commerce truly coming to fruition, and the way that, like we talked about at the beginning, just that the ChatGPT Etsy integration is really a sign of things to come. And I think there will be, very soon people will be buying things from your BigCommerce or your commerce store or your Shopify store or what have you straight out of their LLM. And so, how do you prepare for that as an e-commerce store?
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd like to bring up in the next couple of weeks, whenever we're going to have time, is that there are 5 levels of data, and Sharon had a great way of breaking down the 5 levels of data. That I would like to kind of dive into that, and I think that'd make a great episode just to learn what are those different levels. The top one just being your title, description, image, size, color, weight. The basic descriptions that everybody sees. And then all the way down to contextual data that we need to make sure we're having on the site. So I think that'd be a really interesting discussion. Isaac, do you have the next date we're going to be live?
Well, I think 2 Thursdays from now, unless there's anything going on. So that would be
Is that already November 6th? I can't even believe it.
November 6th, yeah, that's crazy.
Where's our year going? All right, well, yeah. I encourage everybody to share this with, we're here every other Thursday. Content in commerce, and I think our introduction tells us what we're talking about. Content in commerce. I don't think we need to get. Is there a better descriptor that you can think of? Don't ChatGPT it.
Pretty nice and concise to me.
All right. Next week or next time too, I think, Isaac, we're going to have to do the free joke project as a beginning. With David here.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.